K-drama school. I have been making kombucha at home. Did I talk about this? I've been brewing my own kombucha. That is happening. That is my life now. I do yoga daily and I brew kombucha. And does that make me judge myself sometimes? Yeah. I mean, yeah. Because I judge people who go to India in search of spiritual awakenings. I do. And that is why it's hard for me to accept the fact that I do yoga and I brew kombucha. Isn't that fucking ridiculous? It's so silly. It's so silly. And yet, that is where I'm at. That is where I am at. And I'm trying my best to be okay with it all. Brewing kombucha is actually a lot of fun. I remember when I was growing mushrooms at home, it was also a lot of fun because you're nurturing something and it's growing because of things that I put together, like I put together certain elements and then those elements start to have a chemical response with one another and then some kind of fruit starts to bear. And it's really an incredible and fun feeling. So, I'm like, well, I've made, I've grown mushrooms before. Kombucha is basically a type of mushroom. And so, yeah, I started making it. And the home brewed kombucha does taste a lot better. And it is way more economical, like way cheaper. I mean, buying kombucha for like $5 a bottle just doesn't make any sense to me anymore. It's just like a complete waste of money. And it's fun. Like I get to pick certain herbs and berries and let them steep in the final fermentation for them to fizz. And then I get to taste it in a couple of days. So, there's like this sort of process period, like it's not like with all fungus and fermentation processes, but like there's a waiting period, and that waiting period, the build up, and then to see it the next day or the day after or after 6 days or 10 days, like at whatever stage I'm in with the brewing process. I mean, it took me like a good 3 weeks to taste my first kombucha batch. And it's I'm still in the learning process of it, like still in the learning journey of it all. And you know what, like it's great. So if you want to brew kombucha at home, I recommend it. It's fun. It's actually a lot of fun. And it's not that difficult. It's actually quite easy. Yeah. It's about as easy as, I don't know, growing a plant. If you have a plant at home, you can do this. You know what? I took a detour yesterday and I decided to give myself a day off, call it an artist's day. And I just went out, had myself the most expensive lunch I've had perhaps ever in my life. I don't think I've spent that much money on a lunch by myself. But I needed to do it. I was just like, I feel like I'm neglecting myself, like I don't show myself a good time. So I went to Blue Ribbon Sushi at the Grove. And when I was 18, yeah, when I was like 18 years old, I was dating this like slightly older dude who would take me to Blue Ribbon Sushi for special occasions. And I remember feeling like, oh, this is like such a fancy experience, So ever since then, like Blue Ribbon Sushi became this fancy thing in my head. But it's just whatever. I mean, the sushi's okay, but honestly, everything is just kind of whatever over there. But I went there specifically because Blue Ribbon Sushi has this creme brulee, which they make out of green tea. And the last time I had that green tea creme brulee was like, over 16 years ago. So I wanted to have that green tea creme brulee for dessert, which is why I went there for lunch. And I had an appetizer, I had a drink. Well, it was a club soda. I had a drink, and I had myself a sushi platter, and then I had the green tea creme brulee for dessert. And my lunch bill came out to be almost $100. And you know what? It was worth it. Yeah, it was. I wanted to treat myself like a fucking princess that day, and I did. And then afterwards, I went to the movie theater because I wanted to see Kelly Reichardt's new movie Showing Up, which stars Michelle Williams and Hong Chow. And I went to the Lumiere Theater, which is in Beverly Hills, and for some reason, like, their doors don't open. Like, the movie theater's doors are permanently locked, and you have to like bang on it, or you have to go to the box office and tell the guy. Like, if somebody's not sitting in the box office seat, then you just have to bang on the door until somebody opens it, which is like a terrible system. It's a horrible system. They should have a bell, or they should just have doors that open and close like normal, because it's a movie theater, it's a public space. But anyway, they had this like ridiculous setup of a system, and it was testing me. It was testing my patience that day, because not only was that all wonky, but the parking meters were also wonky, and whatever. It was a Sega. It was a Sega. And yeah, like, I got into a bit of a tiff with the person who works there, because I was banging on the glass, like saying, please open up. And she goes, yeah, please don't bang on the glass so hard. And it's like, listen, if this place had doors that just opened and closed, um, so that patrons can enter and leave as they please, which they have the right to, then there would be no banging of any glass, right? Like, there would be no need to bang on glass. If they had a doorbell, there would be no need for banging of glass. I mean, they left me with no other choice but to bang on glass. I mean, should I have stood there silently, staring, waiting for somebody to eventually notice me? No, I couldn't do that, because the show had already started and I had just stepped out to my car because I left my phone in there. What was this experience trying to teach me, right? That's the big question, right? And, it's just fucking, it happens. Yeah, like, people are the way that they are, and that includes me. And tiffs happen, different perspectives are, at play at all times. And because of these differing perspectives, conflicts may arise, friction may arise, and it's just the case. It's just how it goes. It doesn't mean that I need to turn it into a warfare, which is usually where my mind is at. I usually want to turn it into a warfare. But, that afternoon, I was just like, let's not let this lady ruin the movie. Was the movie amazing? Not really. Honestly, I kind of walked away from the film thinking, like, wait, how is this a movie? Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that to be, like, offensive, but it's more like, I mean, Kelly Reichardt is a very well-respected filmmaker, and I've seen Wendy and Lucy, which I liked, but I just don't get how this film is a film, because it's just so, like, it's so quiet and it's so small, that I'm just almost like, how? It's more out of like amazement and wonderment. Um, and perhaps it's another message saying, well, I can go and make a movie if this gets to be a movie. Like, I think it's more in those lines rather than like a resentful or bitter sort of questioning, like, how is this a movie, if that makes sense. Oh, you guys, Time Magazine interviewed me. Hello, I should have talked about that earlier. See, this is the problem. I'm not very good at celebrating myself. I was talking shit about myself, but I'm not very good at celebrating myself. Yeah, Time Magazine interviewed me with questions about a show called Exo Kitty, which is on Netflix. And Exo Kitty is not a K-drama. Not in the least. The showrunner is Korean American. I think she's born in like Virginia or something. She's the woman who created like those. Is it a movie or a series, like the To All the Boys I Ever Loved? I think it's a film, right? It's like a teenage rom com or something. So the creator is the creator of that, and the person who was interviewing me, this reporter at Time, this white lady, she wanted to ask me questions about like queerness found in K dramas. And I knew, like, even before she was asking me these questions, I just knew what her story angle would have been. Her story angle would have been that South Korea is very backwards when it comes to rights of, queerly identifying people. It's a little bit discriminatory. I mean, there's a tad bit of prejudice in that very concept from the get-go, because the intention is to make South Korea seem backwards. But relative to whom? Relative to America? I mean, are we comparing South Korea to American standards here when it comes to queer rights? The article also says that South Korean queer rights are not recognized, and this is not true. Technically, this is not true. Right now, there is a conservative party that is holding the presidential seat at the moment. So it's very a bit right wing leaning in South Korea at the time. And yeah, that is definitely affecting policies when it comes to marginalized communities. But it's not illegal to be gay in South Korea. It is not illegal to be trans in South Korea. And I wished that the article would have recognized more of the LGBTQIA plus members' work in South Korea before just jumping to these overall broader conclusions or assumptions. Technically, they're assumptions, from a white savior complex standpoint, assuming that South Korea is backwards when it comes to queer rights. But no, South Korea is teeming with queer individuals who are also activists, who are also community members, who exist. All right. It's not like they're invisible, they exist. But I mean, why are their efforts completely not recognized? Like, why aren't any of them interviewed for this topic? No, like, there's a whole genre of K dramas called boy love, on Viki. And that genre is about homosexual relationships between male characters, which is rooted in fanfic, which is from a, you know, cis female hetero gaze. I mean, it's very, very queer. Like, the queerness is bonkers when it comes to K dramas. So I don't understand it when people say that Korean dramas do not recognize queerness. No, it does. It does to a hyper extent. It does so much that it doesn't even realize how queer it is. I mean, that's Korean dramas to me. It's like Korean television is like one of the queerest things in existence. From my viewing. That's my reading. The show I want to discuss today is called Birthcare Center, which is a TV and K-drama from the year 2020 written by Kim Ji-soo, who's written a few Korean dramas, and I haven't seen any of them. Birthcare Center is a short series which I think is because, first of all, they were shooting this during the pandemic. So they started filming it in the summer 2020, and then it started airing in the fall of 2020. So you can only imagine how difficult that must have been. And it was also very low on ratings. So this show only had 8 episodes. The show follows a woman named Hyunjin who works as an executive at her company. After the birth of her son, Hyunjin goes to a postnatal care facility where she stays with other mothers and their newborn to recover and to have some assistance with raising a newborn for the first time. And there's so many women that Hyunjin compares herself to at this facility. Hyunjin is, first of all, she's like the oldest woman at this birthing facility. Like, she's in her late 30s. This is her first baby. But there are other women there, like Eunjung, for instance, who is heralded as the perfect mother for having given birth to twin boys and having breastfed them both for 2 years. And she is now a mother to another newborn. And she's also the wife to a very well-known athlete, a celebrity golfer. Hyunjin wants to go back to work. Her intention is fully to return to her job as an executive, but she feels threatened by her current substitute replacement executive who is younger than she is and also has international work experience. And Hyunjin just throughout the whole show feels insecure, believing that the company is trying to oust her or replace her or turn her irrelevant. Hyunjin also struggles with guilt and shame over her decision to be a working mom as she compares herself to the other mothers at the facility who all devote their lives to their children. Hyunjin cherishes her work and her job title, but she also self-flagellates herself with worst-case scenarios that she conjures in her mind, assuming that her son will one day grow up resenting her or grow up with all these problems as a result of her being a working mom. At the core here, the struggle for Hyunjin is her concern with everybody else and what they think of her. And a newborn baby, if you think about it, they're actually the scariest audience because they don't really have any like reaction or recognition at the time of their birth because they're just a newborn. And, there's really no way to know what her son is going to grow up to think of her as, right? I mean, this is all uncertain. So it's really a testament to Hyunjin's anxiety throughout the series, right? It's this anxious feeling like, oh, I don't know what's going to come next. I don't know what's going to happen if I do this. I don't know what the consequences of this are. So the whole thing is just riding a wave of Hyunjin's anxiety as a new mom. And the show explores some really interesting topics like what happens to a woman's desirability and sexuality after giving birth? What happens to her relationship with her husband after giving birth? What happens to her career after she gives birth? So the show does more than explore just workaholism versus motherhood. It's also a fear of not being seen, fear of being forgotten, fear of being turned irrelevant. And I was wondering, like, what is this fear of being forgotten? Which is a fear that I also share. Well, what is at the heart of that? And turns out it's the fear of death. Yeah. Everything at the root is just a fear of death. And I'm recording this on the same day that I saw news of my friend Shani Mofat, who was a guest on my podcast back in 2021. And Shani became a mother about 9 days ago. Her daughter, her infant daughter Matilda, passed away at only 8 months old due to an illness that she's been battling since birth. And while I can't imagine what the loss of her daughter must be like for Shani and her partner and the rest of her family right now, what I know for certainty is that there was so much excitement when Matilda was first conceived, and then that Matilda was very loved by her parents and by her parents' friends. While Birthcare Center satirizes the amount of money that goes into child rearing, right? Like a baby's well-being, the right comforter, the right, baby stroller, like the right education, the right babysitter, the right safety measures, whatever it takes, right? Like these parents just spend so much money looking for the best for their children. But the show doesn't really explore primal bonding and love between parent and child until the very end through the character Park Yoon-ji, who's been mourning her dead infant son throughout the series. I think the reason why the fear of death exists in us is not just for self preservation, but also because when we witness or experience death in our social circles, there comes a great sadness. So the fear of death is also a fear of certain emotions, like difficult emotions. But I take comfort in knowing that the great sadness that follows the news of a person's death is evidence of love. Mourning a loss is evidence of having loved what is lost. And the greater the mourning, the greater the evidence of said loss. So I want to hold a moment of silence to honor the memory of Matilda Mofat.